My name is Maya, and this is the story of how my wealthy aunt's cruelty became the catalyst for the most satisfying moment of my career. Let me paint you the picture of where this all started, because understanding my relationship with my Aunt Victoria is essential to understanding just how devastating her betrayal was. Victoria Chin Morrison was my mother's older sister, and in our family, she was practically a legend. While my mom worked as a high school guidance counselor and my dad was a firefighter, Aunt Victoria had built a business empire from scratch. She started with a small consulting firm in her 20s and over 3 decades had grown it into Morrison Strategic Solutions, one of the most respected corporate consulting companies on the West Coast. Victoria was the family success story, the one everyone looked up to and talked about at family gatherings. She lived in a mansion in Pacific Heights, drove luxury cars, traveled the world for both business and pleasure, and seemed to have everything money could buy. More importantly to me as a kid, she was also the coolest aunt anyone could ask for. Growing up, Victoria was my hero. She would visit us in our modest suburban home with expensive gifts and fascinating stories from her business travels. She treated me like I was special, always telling me I was smart and ambitious and that I reminded her of herself when she was young. She encouraged my interest in business and economics, bought me books about female entrepreneurs, and promised that someday she would help me build my own empire. When I was in high school, Victoria offered to pay for my college education. My parents were incredibly grateful because there was no way they could afford to send me to the kind of prestigious university that Victoria insisted I should attend. She said investing in my education was investing in the family's future and that she expected great things from me. I worked incredibly hard to live up to her expectations. I graduated summa cum laude from Stanford with degrees in business and economics, then immediately entered the MBA program at Wharton, which Victoria also funded. During school breaks, I interned at Morrison Strategic Solutions, learning the business from the ground up and soaking up everything Victoria was willing to teach me. Victoria always made it clear that she expected me to eventually join her company full-time after completing my education. She would talk about grooming me to take over the business someday, since she had never married or had children of her own. I felt incredibly privileged and motivated, knowing that my future was secure and that I had someone so successful believing in my potential. After finishing my MBA, I joined Morrison Strategic Solutions as a junior consultant. Victoria put me through a rigorous training program, exposing me to every aspect of the business from client relations to financial analysis to strategic planning. I threw myself into the work, often staying late and coming in on weekends, determined to prove that her investment in me had been worthwhile. For the first 2 years, everything seemed to be going according to plan. I was promoted twice, given increasingly complex projects, and frequently praised by Victoria for my work ethic and results. She would introduce me to clients and colleagues as her protégé, and it felt like I was living the dream that we had planned together since I was a teenager. But then life threw me a curveball that changed everything. It started with what I thought was just fatigue from working too many long hours. I was feeling exhausted all the time, having trouble concentrating, and experiencing irregular periods. I assumed it was stress and the demanding work schedule, so I tried to address it with better sleep and nutrition. When the symptoms got worse instead of better, I finally went to see a doctor. After a series of tests and consultations with specialists, I received news that shattered my world. I had been diagnosed with ovarian cancer, stage 2. The oncologist explained that while my cancer had been caught relatively early, the treatment would be intensive and expensive. I would need immediate surgery to remove the tumor, followed by months of chemotherapy, regular monitoring, and potentially additional procedures if the cancer returned. I was 27 years old, just starting to build my career, and suddenly facing a life-threatening illness that would require me to step away from work for several months while I focused on treatment and recovery. The financial reality was daunting. Even with the health insurance provided by Morrison Strategic Solutions, the out-of-pocket costs for my treatment were estimated to be around $70,000. This included deductibles, co-pays for the numerous appointments and procedures, medications not fully covered by insurance, and the cost of experimental treatments if the standard protocols were not effective. $70,000 might as well have been $70 million for someone in my position. I had student loans from my expensive education, was paying rent on an apartment in San Francisco, and had been putting most of my income toward building an emergency fund and paying down debt. I had maybe $12,000 in savings, nowhere near enough to cover my medical expenses. I was terrified, not just about the cancer diagnosis, but about the financial burden that could bankrupt me before I even had a chance to fight the disease. That's when I made the decision to approach Victoria for help. I want to be clear about something important. I was not asking for charity or a handout. I was asking my wealthy aunt, who had invested in my education and career specifically because she believed I was family worth investing in, to help me through a medical crisis that threatened to destroy everything we had built together. I scheduled a meeting with Victoria at her corner office overlooking the San Francisco Bay. I had been in that office hundreds of times before, but this time felt different. I was not there as her protege or her employee. I was there as her desperate niece, begging for help to save my life. I explained my diagnosis and the treatment plan that my oncologist had recommended. I showed her the financial estimates and explained how the costs would be distributed over the next 8 to 12 months. I told her that I was prepared to take a leave of absence from work during treatment and that I understood she could not pay my salary during that time. Then I asked if she would consider lending me the money to cover my medical expenses. I promised to pay her back with interest once I was healthy and back to work. I even offered to sign a formal loan agreement with whatever terms she thought were fair. Victoria listened to my entire presentation without interrupting, occasionally nodding or asking clarifying questions about the treatment timeline or specific costs. When I finished speaking, she leaned back in her leather chair and was quiet for what felt like an eternity. Finally, she spoke, and her words changed our relationship forever. Victoria told me that she was sorry about my diagnosis and that she hoped the treatment would be successful. But then she said that she could not justify lending me the money I was asking for because, from a business perspective, I was not a good investment at that moment. She explained that lending $70,000 to someone with cancer was financially risky because there was no guarantee that I would survive the treatment, and even if I did, there was no guarantee that I would be able to return to my previous level of productivity and earning potential. She said that she had already invested significantly in my education and early career, and that adding medical expenses on top of that investment would be throwing good money after bad. She told me that if I truly had the business acumen she thought I had, I would understand her position and find another way to finance my treatment. Victoria suggested that I look into medical loans, crowdfunding, or asking other family members for help. She said that my parents had equity in their house that they could potentially borrow against, or that I could reach out to extended family members who might be willing to contribute smaller amounts. But the most devastating part of the conversation was still coming. Victoria told me that she was disappointed that I had put her in this awkward position by asking for money, and that she had expected me to be more resourceful and independent. She said that coming to her for help when things got difficult showed a lack of the entrepreneurial spirit that she had thought I possessed. She said that successful business people find solutions to their problems without relying on others to bail them out, and that this situation was a test of my character and business acumen that I was failing. As I sat there listening to my aunt reduce my life-threatening illness to a failed investment opportunity, I felt something inside me break that I am not sure ever fully healed. This was not just a rejection of my request for help. This was a rejection of me as a person, a dismissal of our entire relationship, and a declaration that my life was worth less than the money in her bank account. Victoria concluded our meeting by saying that she hoped I would find a way to get the treatment I needed, and that perhaps this experience would teach me valuable lessons about self-reliance and financial planning that would serve me well in my future business endeavors. I walked out of her office in a daze, struggling to process what had just happened. The woman who had raised me to believe that family was everything, who had invested in my education because she said I was special, who had promised to help me build an empire, had just told me that my life was not worth $70,000 to her. But Victoria was not done destroying our relationship. Over the next few weeks, word somehow got around the office that I had asked Victoria for money and been turned down. I started noticing changes in how my colleagues treated me. Some seemed to avoid me. Others looked at me with what felt like pity, and a few made comments that suggested they thought I was unprofessional for mixing family and business. I realized that Victoria had shared details of our private conversation with other people in the company, painting me as someone who could not handle her own problems and had inappropriately tried to leverage our family relationship for financial gain. The hostile work environment became unbearable, especially as I was dealing with surgery and starting chemotherapy and all the physical and emotional challenges that came with cancer treatment. I made the difficult decision to resign from Morrison Strategic Solutions and focus entirely on my health. Victoria accepted my resignation without any attempt to convince me to stay or to address the toxic situation she had created. She wished me luck with my treatment and said she hoped I would land on my feet once I was healthy again. I spent the next 10 months fighting for my life, both literally and financially. I took out medical loans at crushing interest rates, set up a crowdfunding campaign that raised some money from friends and extended family, and watched my parents mortgage their house to help cover my treatment costs. The physical battle with cancer was brutal, but the emotional battle with feeling abandoned by someone I had trusted completely was almost worse. I spent long hours during chemotherapy sessions thinking about Victoria's betrayal and promised myself that someday I would show her exactly how wrong she had been about my worth and my potential. The treatment was successful. After surgery, 8 months of chemotherapy, and 2 months of recovery, my oncologist declared me to be in complete remission. The cancer was gone, and while I would need regular monitoring for years to make sure it did not return, I was officially a survivor. But I was also financially devastated and professionally adrift. The medical loans had destroyed my credit, I had no savings left, and I had been out of the workforce for almost a year. I needed to rebuild my entire life from scratch. Instead of trying to find another job at an established consulting firm, I made a decision that surprised everyone who knew me. I decided to start my own business. Using the strategic planning and client relations skills I had learned at Morrison Strategic Solutions, plus everything I had learned about resilience and determination during my cancer treatment, I launched Chin Strategic Consulting. I started small, working from my apartment, and focusing on helping mid-sized companies with business development and operational efficiency. I leveraged every professional relationship I had built during my time in the industry, reached out to former clients who had been impressed with my work, and slowly began building a reputation as someone who could deliver results. The first year was incredibly challenging. I was working 18-hour days, taking on any project that would pay the bills, and constantly worried about whether I would be able to make my business viable in the long term. But I was motivated by more than just financial necessity. I was driven by a burning desire to prove Victoria wrong about everything she had said about my worth and potential. By the end of my second year in business, Chin Strategic Consulting had grown to include 4 full-time employees and had landed several major clients. We were generating over $2 million in annual revenue, and I was finally able to start paying down my medical debt. More importantly, Word was getting around the industry that my small firm was delivering exceptional results for clients and was beginning to compete with much larger, more established consulting companies. By year 3, we had expanded to 15 employees and had opened a second office. Our client list included several Fortune 500 companies, and we were being recognized as one of the fastest-growing consulting firms on the West Coast. I made sure to take on some projects that put me in direct competition with Morrison Strategic Solutions. When we won a major contract that Victoria's company had been pursuing, I felt a satisfaction that was almost as sweet as my cancer remission had been. But I was building towards something much bigger than just professional success. I was building toward the moment when I would face Victoria again and show her exactly how spectacularly wrong she had been about me. That moment came during my 4th year in business, when I learned that Morrison Strategic Solutions was struggling financially. Victoria had made some poor strategic decisions, lost several major clients, and was facing serious cash flow problems. Industry rumors suggested that she might be forced to sell the company or merge with a larger competitor. I saw an opportunity that felt like destiny. Using a combination of my own company's profits, investor backing, and strategic partnerships, I put together a buyout offer for Morrison Strategic Solutions. It was a complex deal that took months to negotiate, but Victoria was in no position to refuse a fair offer for a company that was failing under her leadership. The acquisition was structured so that Morrison Strategic Solutions would become a subsidiary of Chin Strategic Consulting, with me as the CEO of the combined entity. Victoria would remain as a consultant for 1 year to help with the transition, but she would no longer be in control of the company she had spent 3 decades building. The deal closed on a Friday in October, and that weekend I prepared for what I knew would be the most satisfying Monday morning of my professional life. But I decided not to wait until Monday. I decided to make my reveal at the annual Morrison Strategic Solutions Gala, a black-tie charity event that Victoria had hosted every year for the past decade. It was the social highlight of the business calendar, attended by hundreds of influential clients, partners, and industry leaders. Victoria had no idea that I would be attending the gala, much less that I was now the CEO of her former company. The acquisition had been handled through lawyers and intermediaries, so she knew the company had been sold, but had not yet met the new ownership team. I arrived at the St. Regis Hotel ballroom, wearing the most expensive gown I had ever owned, feeling healthier and more confident than I had ever felt in my life. As I walked through the reception area, I saw many familiar faces from my days working at Morrison Strategic Solutions. Some people recognized me and seemed surprised to see me there, while others had no idea who I was. Victoria was holding court near the center of the ballroom, surrounded by clients and colleagues. She looked elegant and composed, every inch the successful businesswoman she had always prided herself on being. But I could see the stress in her eyes, the subtle signs of someone who is putting on a brave face while dealing with serious problems behind the scenes. I waited until the formal program began, and Victoria took the stage to address the crowd. She thanked everyone for attending and talked about the important charitable work that the evening was supporting. She mentioned that this had been a challenging year for the company, but that she was confident in their ability to overcome current difficulties and continue serving their clients with excellence. Then she said something that provided the perfect opening for what I had planned. Victoria told the crowd that Morrison Strategic Solutions had always been built on the principle of investing in people who demonstrated exceptional potential, and that she was proud of the many successful careers that had been launched from her company. That was my cue. I had arranged with the event organizers to be introduced as a special guest speaker representing the company's new ownership. When my name was announced, I walked onto the stage while Victoria was still standing at the podium, looking confused about what was happening. The ballroom fell silent as I approached the microphone. Victoria stared at me in shock, clearly trying to process how her niece had suddenly appeared on stage at her company's gala. I looked out at the crowd of hundreds of business leaders and began to speak. I introduced myself as Maya Chen, the new CEO of Morrison Strategic Solutions, and explained that I was there to share some exciting news about the company's future direction under new ownership. I talked about my vision for expanding the company's services, investing in new technology and talent, and building on the strong foundation that had been established over the past 3 decades. But then I decided to get personal. I told the audience that Morrison Strategic Solutions held special meaning for me because I had actually worked there early in my career before leaving to start my own consulting firm. I mentioned that my former boss, Victoria Chen Morrison, was standing right there on stage with me. I said that Victoria had taught me many valuable lessons during my time at the company, including some lessons that she probably had not intended to teach. Then I shared the story of my cancer diagnosis and Victoria's response when I had asked for help with my medical bills. I told the ballroom full of Victoria's clients, colleagues, and friends that when I was 27 years old and facing a life-threatening illness, my wealthy aunt had told me that I was not worth investing in because I had cancer. I explained that Victoria had refused to lend me money for medical treatment because she considered me a bad investment, and that she had suggested I was lacking in business acumen and entrepreneurial spirit for asking family for help during a medical crisis. The audience was completely silent, clearly shocked by what they were hearing. I continued by explaining that Victoria's rejection had motivated me to prove her wrong about my worth and potential. I talked about building Chen's strategic consulting from nothing while recovering from cancer, growing it into a multi-million-dollar business, and ultimately acquiring the company that had once employed me. I said that Victoria had been right about one thing. The experience had taught me valuable lessons about business and character. But the lessons I learned were not the ones she had intended. I learned that true success is not measured by how much wealth you accumulate, but by how you treat people when they are vulnerable and need your help. I learned that real strength comes not from refusing to help others, but from lifting people up when they are struggling. And I learned that the best investment you can make is in people who will remember your kindness and support when they have the power to make decisions that affect your future. I concluded by saying that under my leadership, Morrison Strategic Solutions would operate according to these principles, treating employees, clients, and partners with the respect and compassion that everyone deserves. The audience erupted in applause, and I could see Victoria's face had gone completely white. She looked like she wanted to disappear, but there was nowhere for her to go while standing on stage in front of hundreds of people. After my speech, I was surrounded by people who wanted to congratulate me on the acquisition and to express their shock at Victoria's treatment of me during my illness. Many clients and industry leaders made a point of telling me that they looked forward to working with the company under new leadership. Victoria, meanwhile, had quickly left the stage and was nowhere to be found. She had slipped out of her own gala rather than face the aftermath of having her cruelty exposed in front of everyone who mattered in her professional life. The next morning, Victoria sent me a brief email saying that she would not be staying for the 1-year consulting period that had been written into the acquisition agreement. She said she preferred to make a clean break and wished me success in running the company. I never responded to that email, and I have not spoken to Victoria since that night at the gala. In the 2 years since the acquisition, the combined company has grown by 300%. We have expanded into new markets, developed innovative service offerings, and built a reputation as an industry leader in corporate consulting. More importantly, we have created a company culture based on supporting our employees through both professional challenges and personal crises. We offer comprehensive health insurance, emergency assistance funds, and flexible work arrangements for people dealing with medical issues or family emergencies. I think about Victoria sometimes, and I feel a complex mix of emotions about our relationship and how it ended. I am grateful that her cruelty motivated me to achieve success that I might never have reached if she had simply helped me through my medical crisis. But I am also sad that our family relationship was destroyed by her inability to see past dollar signs and investment returns to the human being who needed her help. I have heard through industry contacts that Victoria has retired from consulting and spends most of her time traveling. I hope she is happy, and I hope that someday she reflects on our story and understands the lessons that her actions taught both of us. The cancer experience changed me in ways that go far beyond my relationship with Victoria. It taught me that life is fragile and unpredictable, that success means nothing if you do not use it to help others, and that the measure of a person's character is how they respond when someone they care about is suffering. Today, I lead a company that generates over $20 million in annual revenue, employs more than 60 people, and has been recognized as one of the best places to work in our industry. But the achievement I am most proud of is the employee assistance program we established to help team members facing medical or financial emergencies. We have helped dozens of employees and their families navigate cancer treatments, surgical procedures, family tragedies, and other crises that could have destroyed their financial stability. Every time we are able to support someone through a difficult period, I think about how different my story might have been if Victoria had chosen compassion over calculation. If you are dealing with someone in your life who treats your worth as a business decision, remember that their assessment of your value says more about them than it does about you. Do not let anyone else's inability to see your potential limit what you believe you can achieve. And if you are in a position to help someone who is struggling, remember that your response in their moment of need will define your relationship forever. Choose kindness over calculation, and choose to invest in people rather than just profits. Sometimes the best revenge is not just proving someone wrong, but becoming the kind of person you wish they had been when you needed them most. Thanks for listening to my story. I hope it reminds you that setbacks can become comebacks, and that the people who underestimate you today might find themselves working for you tomorrow.